So the first poison we're going to talk about is mercury in fish. This is not just a concern for pregnant women and kids, although it's a big problem for them as well. It's a problem for all of us, according to a new study from the Centers of Disease Control. Now, here's how mercury gets into our fish. If you look at this graphic back here, you'll see that we get rid of waste, whether it's directly emitted into the atmosphere because we're burning stuff off, or we put it through incineration, or it's in a landfill that eventually goes up and evaporates to the sky. All of this stuff comes back in the form of rain into our oceans. The mercury then is converted into a form that fish can absorb. It goes into the algae. Small fish eat the algae. Middle-sized fish eat the small fish. The big fish eat the middle-sized fish. And the fish, therefore, begin to accumulate more and more of this material that we know is incredibly toxic. Now, a recent EPA study is absolutely stunning to all of us. Mercury is found in nearly every single freshwater fish that is tested. Dr. Jane Hightower is joining us today. She's been studying mercury pollution and poisoning for the last 10 years. In your opinion, difficult question, but I think a lot of folks are coming together around this. Is there a safe level of mercury in any of the things we eat?
That's a good question. There hasn't been really studies, and there has never been a safe level found in humans.
All right, so to make this really clear, when you eat contaminated fish, mercury gets into your bloodstream and attacks the brain.
Yes.
We don't think so smart. And it also attacks the body's nervous system. And there's some symptoms of mercury poisoning that I want everyone to listen to really carefully, because if you think you or someone you love has these symptoms, this is a pretty good definition of what mercury poisoning looks like. So one of the symptoms of mercury poisoning is the brain getting a little fuzzy, but there are a bunch of others as well. And Dr. Hightower has a name for this. I think you call it fish fog.
Right. Many of my patients came in. I couldn't find a reason why. They're all having troubles thinking, concentrating, tremor, insomnia, hair loss, muscle and joint pain, stomach upset. And so we started calling it fish fog, being in the Bay Area, you know. And what was fascinating is it goes beyond just symptoms. These are the lesser symptoms.
So let me, if I can, because I want to be crystal clear on this. I don't want anyone missing this cue at all. We have very clear signs when we have mercury poisoning in our body. So the first one is the fish fog. We just don't seem so sharp. And second is we begin to get sort of fatigued, and we just can't get going anymore. Sound familiar to some of you? Bet you it does. Headaches, of course, get through there as well. The trouble thinking is part of this whole fish fog scenario. Tremors and an unsteady gait, when you can't quite walk the way you wanted to walk. Of course, those are more severe. The top three, the fish fog symptoms, are the ones that I think many folks watching right now are going to say, you know what? Now, that could be someone that I know. And Amy is joining us today, and Amy actually was diagnosed with mercury poisoning. How did that happen? Walk us through that.
I have neuropathy, and I had none of the standard things that you would have with neuropathy. I was tested for diabetes, no diabetes. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't drink. I didn't have what one would have. And so I initially thought, well, I was exposed to a lot at 9/11. I thought it must be that. And I went to my doctor, who actually is at the same hospital you are, and I said, well, here are the results. And he looked and he said, fish. And he literally said, fish. And I said, oh, I don't eat that much fish. Well, in fact, I do. I have at least 2 meals of sushi a week. I travel to Japan frequently for my business.
So you have 2 servings of fish a week.
But
you were diagnosed with having mercury poisoning that led to symptoms of the kind I just mentioned.
Oh, yes, and I have severe, and I have neuropathy.
Is that clear, everybody? And neuropathy means you can't feel your fingers and your toes sometimes, and you lose your gait, can't walk with the stability that you want. And that's with 2 servings of sushi a week. I'm going to bring these issues again into all of our consciousness, because this is not what we thought to be a toxic amount of mercury, but it's something that we need to keep on our radar screen. So what we wanted to do was decide how much mercury is in some of the common fish that we buy here in New York, where we tape the show. So we actually took a sampling of fish to a laboratory that we work with. You have examples here of a lot of different fish you find in the ocean, and this happens to be sushi grade tuna. And guess what? It had the highest levels of mercury of any of the fish here in New York State that we were sampling. Now, my favorite fish, which is actually salmon, it turns out, by the way, it's got omega-3 fats and lots of good reasons to get a fish like salmon in our diet, had the lowest amounts of mercury. And there's a reason for that, by the way. It's not just a coincidence that the salmon fish happen to be younger fish. And this is going to become important when I come back and talk about recommendations. And I think that across the board, you look at some of the different reasons that fish that are older have more mercury. It comes back to that diagram that I showed you earlier. Dr. Hightower, thank you very much. Amy, I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Yourself from poison in the food supply is to eat fish that are lower in mercury. And I say that because So often we make decisions about fish saying, hey, you know what, it's heart healthy, it's got the right omega-3 fatty acids, but there are things you can do to reduce the amount of mercury that you're getting in the fish that you eat. So besides the salmon, you can eat younger fish and smaller fish, like herrings and sardines. So a lot of us in our food supply don't think about it very much. They actually have a lot less mercury in them. And there's some fish recommendations I want to be clear with you on, because there's some that are a little bit more toxic than others. Sushi, tuna, tilefish, these are fish you probably shouldn't be eating too commonly in order to lower your exposure to mercury, or else you're going to be spending 6 months not having any fish to wash it out if you get any of that fish fog that we spoke of earlier. For tuna, you can get it in a can or in a pouch, but guess what? We checked it. And you know what we found? We found that, in fact, the tuna that's better quality tuna, the albacore tuna, the solid white tuna, it actually had more mercury in it than the expensive chunk light tuna. Now, I say this to you because most folks think more expensive is better. And you know what? The albacore tuna is a bigger fish. It's an older fish. It does tend to taste better for a lot of folks, and that's why they charge you more for it. Right? We clear on fish? Young fish, small fish?